Annual flowers are a brilliant way of adding colour to your garden for very little cost. So today I'm going to show you how they can be used to transform your space. So what is an annual flower? Well, an annual plant is one which completes its life cycle within the space of 12 months, as opposed to perennials, which live indefinitely, and biennials, which are sown 1 year to flower the next. So annuals we tend to sow in very early spring, they flower in the summer, and then when the frosts come, they die. Hardy annuals can cope with a bit of cold weather. Half-hardy and tender annuals are susceptible to frost and will die. So there you are in a nutshell. I was very grateful for annual flowers when I first got married because we hadn't got very much money. And we had a garden, a tiny weeny one, on sandy soil. And I got some packets of seeds, like these pot marigolds, calendulas. And I sowed them in the soil exactly where they were to grow. And they came up. And they cost me next to nothing. That was the time when we used to save 10p a week with the butcher to buy a Christmas joint. You get my feeling? Right, okay. And that means I've always had a great soft spot for them. They helped me out when I wanted colour in my garden and I didn't have much in the way of money. Here, I've got some annual plants that we sowed from seed way back in February, March. And most of these here, like the cosmos and the poppies, are a little bit tender to frost. But calendula, the pot marigold, this is really quite tough, and you could sow this outside in little rows or sprinkle it between the plants in your borders, and it will come up being direct sown as a hardy annual. So the seeds arrived in the new year. They'll then turn up in a little box like this, here in what looks like an old shampoo sachet. You're probably too young to remember them, but this is for a very good reason. This keeps them fresh, and it'll tell you on here, sow by June 2028. So you can tell they're going to stay really fresh in these hermetically sealed packets. What we did then, back in March, was to sow them in seed compost. They were watered in and then kept gently moist right the way through until germination, when the first little shoots came up through the surface of that compost. And during May, particularly towards the end of the month, they can be hardened off, stood outside during the day, brought back in at night to protect them from any frosts, and once the danger of frost is past, then they can be left outside and you can get round to actually planting them. Another great thing about annual flowers, apart from the fact that they're easy to raise and economical, is that they'll give you almost instant colour among your perennials and the shrubs in your existing borders. They're good gap fillers at very little cost. And if you suddenly find yourself in June, July with a hole in a bed or border, go to annuals because they'll give you that instant hit. But for now, I'm really grateful for a splash of orange. Now, in our cottage garden, you could have said, Alan, why didn't you plant these closer together? Because then you wouldn't have had any gaps. But if I'd done that, it would have given them no chance over the next year or so to thicken out and grow to their full potential. And also, perennials are more expensive than seed-raised annuals, so this is both practical and economical. And being a cottage garden, nobody minds a bit of contrast and a bit of brightness. It doesn't all have to be perfectly, subtly colour schemed. So I can fit in with these purple salvias here, some bright orange pot marigolds. And they're going to still allow these perennials to fatten up over the summer. They won't get in the way. And next year when they're not here, they'll have disappeared. I'll pop that there. And bearing in mind the juxtaposition of colours, this lovely sort of plummy flowered cosmos, I'll pop there next to the phlox and work a couple more in over there. They'll snake their way through, you see, and they still won't overcrowd the perennials. And then along the front, this lower growing annual poppy. This is not subtle, this is called ladybird. It's red with black spots on, but I really rather like a bit of outrageousness in a cottage garden. Here we are, and suddenly what was a gappy border, and remember these are just going in, these will fill out a bit as well, suddenly it's well furnished and it's jolly. Sometimes you want a garden all the time to make you smile, don't you think? Now, you know I always say read the label when you're planting anything to find out how tall it grows. You'll have to have read the seed packet to tell you how tall your annuals are going to go. But they'll wend their way up. Things like cosmos are quite tall, the calendulas about the height they are now, and these little poppies that are going in here, ladybird, they're quite small. So just get in your head roughly how big they're going to grow, and they'll find their way through one another. But what you don't want is to find your little poppy put back there and becoming swamped. With all of them, the most important thing is you water them really well in these little pots before you plant them, and then once planting's over, give them another watering in. When it comes to soil enrichment, I beefed up this border, if you remember, early on when we planted the perennials, with lots of soil improver to give them something to get their roots into. Annuals quite like poor soil. Put too much manure in for them and they get too beefy with fewer flowers. Here, now, several weeks on from planting the perennials, this soil will be absolutely fine without any additional enrichment. So I'm just sneaking these little annuals in between and they'll have quite enough sustenance. I do love perennials, and you know they're going to give you pleasure year after year. But at the same time, for the cost of a packet of seeds, which will have hundreds, if not thousands in that little packet, to produce plants like this, there's something deeply satisfying about getting enormous value for money, as well as bright flowers for your garden. These plants will really enhance our garden this summer, but I want to look ahead to next year as well, and there's one kind of flower that I can sow now that will do exactly that. One group of flowers whose seeds can be sown at this time of year outdoors are the biennials. Now, an annual completes its life cycle in 1 year. Biennials complete their life cycle in 2. They're sown one summer to flower the following year. A lot of biennials are cottage garden flowers, so they'll suit our YouTube garden down to the ground. Foxgloves. Can you believe in that tiny little packet there? 13,000 seeds. Pity the person who had to count them. Forget-me-nots. And sweet williams, one of my favourites. My granddad grew sweet williams on his allotment. Lovely broad heads of lots of little dianthus. We sow them outdoors in late spring or early summer, and when the young plants have grown by early autumn, they can then be moved to where they're going to flower next year. And by sowing them here on the veg patch, rather than in gaps between perennials, there's less likelihood of them being swamped by the plants growing alongside. Here, they've got air, they've got light, I can give them the moisture they want, and they'll grow away faster. I've done what I do with vegetables, like these lettuces I sowed. A line stretched across the bed here, and then a little furrow flicked out. So these are forget-me-nots. The technique of sowing like this is just the same for foxgloves and sweet williams. Not too crowded. I mean, you can't measure the distance apart, but you know, fairly thinly. And then, and they've gone back in there, just pinch the edges of the furrow together. If it's a bit deep, the furrow, don't feel you've got to fill it. You can just make sure that there's enough over the seeds to hide them from view. Some people like to water the base of the drill, the little furrow, before they sow, and then rely on capillary action to pull the water up through the soil that's been put back. I always like to settle the seeds in, and that means watering afterwards, just over the top, but very gently. Use a sprinkler head, but make sure it's gentle. There's an adjuster which lets you take down the pressure, and that's what we want. To gently wash them in rather than washing them away, and then just go up and down the row very gently. And you can see that's not too aggressive, apart from the odd little airlock. It's not too aggressive, it's just going to gently settle those seeds in. You can go once or twice over it. You don't need to flood it, that will soak in a minute. That will allow the water to get down into the soil. The seeds will then think, oh, this is great, temperature's right, it's nice and dark, plenty of water, I'll start to grow. Well, what we will have then is some young plants that are ready to go out end of summer, early autumn, to ameliorate those borders. And a lot of these biennials flower early in the year, and that means in April, May and June you'll get a good show by sowing just a year earlier in the previous 12 months. What I hope I've shown you is that by using annuals to give you almost instant colour, and a little bit of planning ahead with the biennials, sow them this year to flower next, you'll have a wonderful and relatively inexpensive way of filling your garden with colourful flowers. There's nothing I love more than sharing my passion for gardening with you, so why not subscribe? I'm posting new videos every week.